to start on the pandemic, which feels like it's a very long time away, but also recent. It obviously exposed deep problems with the U.S. supply chain. You fast forward from 2020 until now. Has the U.S. actually made any progress in reshoring its medical and pharmaceutical supply chain?
Well, I mean, so again, the conferences have been amazing, and there's a lot of talk about how we're going to handle our biotechnology future. But the momentum, the catalyst that the pandemic was for a fervor around biotechnology diversity, around a scale up around pharmaceuticals, medical devices, PPE, being sort of reshored either to allies or to the United States, it lost steam, as all things do, right? Because it got eroded away by the day-to-day requirement to just provide care to the hundreds of millions of people in the United States that require it, right? And so what you've seen over the last few years, despite originally the sort of EO 14017 efforts to design better supply chains, you've seen a lack of steam to increase our strategic national stockpile, to increase our diversity of supply and create an organic industrial base. You've seen a lack of real fervor in terms of reshoring pharmaceutical API production and excipient production, which is not actually all that significantly hard to do. It just doesn't have the underlying investment to do it because the current solution is technically working. And that's left us more fragile than we ever were. And it hasn't solved the underlying problems that we saw during the COVID-19 response. I mean, so Exiger was the technology that was utilized to map all of the supply chains across all 30 critical medical sectors where we had purchased $7 billion of PPE, pharmaceuticals, medical devices, treatments, the routing of the vaccines that we did. And during that process, for instance, with ventilators, we identified that all of the commodity ventilators that were published, that Ford and Bloom Energy and GM were going to start producing, the ones that the DoD was going to start producing with L3 Harris, that they all were reliant on the same solenoid valve producer, small company in Italy. We even spoke to the CEO, and he said, look, I'm not going to scale up production because if I do, I need to have a 10-year commitment that you need more of these solenoid valves. And by the way, I sit in the middle of Italy. We're one of the hardest hit countries from a pandemic perspective. I don't have anyone at work. And those kinds of challenges that we've realized, we haven't done a lot to fix. And so, there's sort of this resurgence of potential investment into U.S. biotechnology, and I think, hopefully that starts to make a difference.
And what do you see as the role of the federal government, either the executive branch or Congress, in kind of addressing this issue?
Yeah, so there was a report that just came out that was actually joined with our report, which was around our severe dependence issues on foreign-made APIs, pharmaceuticals, in order to provide cost-effective health care. And that report was a report by the National Security, the National Commission on Emerging Biotechnology, National Security Commission on Emerging Biotechnology. That's it, NSEB. And that's a congressional report that essentially highlighted the major investments that we need to make in order to revive, the United States biotechnology industry. That happened at the same time that the tariffs started to sort of focus acutely on the potential need to reshore our pharmaceuticals and medical devices. What you've seen since the NSEB reports, what you've seen since the tariff sort of saber rattling, because it hasn't been instituted yet, we don't know what it's going to look like at the end of the day, but what you've seen happen is over $170 billion of investment from Roche, AbbVie, Lilly, J&J in U.S. production capabilities, right? And so there is a role for government in terms of both sort of incentivization, regulation, as well as sort of just creating awareness to the problem, and then resetting the stage for what's economically viable in the United States. Because if we can regulate this, if we can make it so that there are incentives to reshore our biotechnology, pharmaceutical PPE life cycle or production lines, it's actually quite cost effective now to make it in the United States, because through AI, through automation, through the fact that a lot of these chemical compounds are readily available, a lot of them are synthetics, can be made cost effectively here in the States. The only thing that you then have, because of AI, automation, that used to be the difference maker between us and emerging markets was labor arbitrage. But everything's automated in these factories now. So the labor arbitrage differential is very thin. And so you can actually reshore it to the United States, and then you've got real estate in North Texas that's cheaper than real estate in Shenzhen or even in parts of India, right? And so regulatory incentives, deregulation so that we can actually build these factories, a global economy that's reliant upon automation, robotics for the manufacturing, you can actually have a competitive pharmaceutical, biotechnology, and PPE industry here in the United States that's economically sound, and you only need a sliver of tariffs to actually incentivize that activity. And we've seen that happen in multiple industries. Like China moved a huge volume of manufacturing to Vietnam in 3 years after the United States started putting tariffs on some of the critical products that they were manufacturing.
I want to come back to AI, but I did want to touch on tariffs further. We hear a lot of concern, criticism from the business community of the tariffs. It sounds like you're sort of a fan of the tariffs. Can you just explain that a little bit more?
I don't know if a fan of the tariffs is an appropriate way to characterize me, but I certainly think that tariffs are a part of a global rebalance. I think everybody in the conference has been talking about this. We've been operating off of a post-World War II global economic power, sort of strength through prosperity, under that guise or strategy for a while. And what we've seen is countries that have the ability to operate with a great degree of opacity take advantage of it, right? And that kind of economic coercion has put us at a severe disadvantage. We talk about critical minerals, just getting away from pharmaceuticals and medical devices, even though critical minerals are necessary for our medical devices as well. We talk about, critical minerals for a second, and a lot of people say gallium and germanium. Those are the things that China makes exclusively. China owns, 80% of the global mining infrastructure. So they don't just own the things that get processed or mined in China, they own the things that are also made in Zambia, right? So we have a severe dependence globally on a few actors that don't necessarily have our best interests in mind and are near peer adversaries. And so we have to bring balance back to what we are going to manufacture here in the United States or in other Western countries or in partners in Asia, whatever it might be. So I'm a fan of utilizing tariffs as a way to start to rebalance our trade imbalances. And I don't mean trade imbalances like, they buy $300 million of stuff from us, or $300 billion of stuff from us, and we buy $100 billion of stuff from them, and that's a trade imbalance. I don't mean that. I mean trade imbalances in terms of leveling the playing field on what's cost efficient to do where, right? And the opacity and economic coercion has made that impossible. So what I think we have to do is we have to have tariffs on things like end-use goods that could be manufactured in a way that is cost-effective and competitive globally in the United States. And then I think components, commodity materials, global markets, free trade, those should reign and rule the day globally. In biotechnology specifically, in order to drive investment into PPE, pharmaceutical development in the United States, you need carrots and sticks. The carrots will drive investment, kind of like you saw in chips and you saw in the Inflation Reduction Act. It'll drive investment, but if you don't have the stick or you don't have the economic policy to force the reshoring, to force the development and growth to be in the United States, then you're going to basically have a lot of innovation in the US and then scale everywhere else, right? Because people can sort of take those existing hot production lines really predicated upon low wage labor and scale them before we can catalyze the demand for investment for these automated production floors.
I want to talk a little bit more about the risk here too. I mean, what do you see as the primary risk of the U.S. being too dependent on China for pharmaceuticals and medical devices? Is it that economic coercion, possibility? What's your sort of nightmare scenario?
Yeah, I mean, so I see the risk as a risk to patients. I mean, my wife has cutaneous T-cell lymphoma. She's had, strokes. She's had issues in autoimmune disease. Many of my family members rely on things like heart disease meds or antibiotics or whatever for day-to-day life, right? And the ability for China to say, I'm going to choke out your access to these APIs. If any pharmaceutical is going to eventually, and you've got this precedent for supply chain sanctions now, with the German Supply Chain Act, with UFLPA, with 889, you have the precedent for supply chain sanctions. They can say any API that we have that's going to the United States is banned. We're going to export control all of it. And then we are literally, in a place where we can't fulfill our health needs. And the health needs that we can't fulfill are unfortunately for those that are in the most vulnerable communities, right? It's the elderly that really demand, cheaper, more cost-effective generics and are living off of Medicaid, right? It's people that are, living off of state-run health services. Like, those are the people that are going to be most impacted. And I don't think that's a risk we can afford. So I think that the possibility of a chokeout of those goods and services, which is what we verged on the precipice of that during COVID-19, that I'm most worried about. The second thing is, like, I'm a big fan of fair, global, free trade markets. So we should be partnering with our allies. We should be partnering with global partners. Like, there's no reason why things couldn't be made in Korea if they're more effective or if there's better strategies. But we also have to be in control of our biotechnology future, because our biotechnology future also determines some of our warfighting capabilities. It determines our economic prosperity. It determines our position in the world. And we've been a leader in the past, and I don't think we don't want to be a leader tomorrow. And
I wanted to, just returning to AI, what do you see as the value of AI in biotech?
Yeah, so there are multiple levels at which AI is incredibly valuable in biotechnology. So first is obviously in research. So I mentioned my wife has cutaneous T-cell lymphoma, very rare cancer, right? So I've been looking into different types of studies that we could get her into, but it's not necessarily an economic cancer, right? Like, it's one in every 1,000, 2,000 people. It's just not going to have the bang for the buck for most pharmaceuticals. So the research is sparse, and then like great organizations like the Leukemia Lymphoma Society, they try to raise money for these specific cancers, but that's even pretty difficult because you can only raise so much, and the cost to actually test and bring a drug to market is so high. And so, when I think about the ability for us to invest in research and to use AI to create that scenario modeling, that genetic modeling, that condition modeling, the biosimilarities between cancers, and actually what might solve multiple problems at once. I think AI as a matter of diagnosis, as a matter of research, as a matter of kind of finding those similarities between cancers to help us find better treatments, it unlocks incredible value. I mean, even for the layperson, there are probably 100 to 150,000 pages of literature on CTCL out there, and I use AI to condense it all and to spit it back to me in ways that I can help my wife with her treatment plan, right? So, I think that there's benefits for research, there's benefits for the patient, and then there's benefits down into production, like our software, which maps all of it takes any chemical compound, any product, any medical device, whatever it is, and it builds automatically a bill of materials. So we've published into our artificial intelligence basically every piece of medical information you can find, every piece of product information you can find, every FDA submission that was done, everything that you've got from the NHS. The AI that we built was originally built by Cambridge University. It was a spin out. And so we've published all of this data into that system. And what it can do is it can take any product, like let's say a stent, right? You've got a polymer on the outside of the stent. You've got a nitinol mesh. It's knowing, okay, well, that polymer is made of, this type of polypropylene. That stent is made of nickel and titanium. Here's the alloy mix. And then here are the suppliers that provide that globally. That breakdown starts to give you availability and visibility into your downstream supply chain, so you can better think about how to design something. Like, am I designing something at the start that has a vibrant industrial base? Am I designing something at the start with inert metals that has, the kind of supply that I need, right? We can think intelligently, not just on the treatment, but on the production line of the supply chain. And then finally, when you get down into the actual production of the materials, look, again, the medical device community has a hurdle because a lot of what they're dealing with is actually in competition with things like cloud computing and IoT, like the things that they need have vibrant, very profitable industries that they're competing against for those same materials and same capabilities. But the pharmaceutical industry has a unique advantage where, if you can actually have AI and automation building the chemical compounds, building the products, printing the drugs, right? You can actually streamline that entire process and make it very cost effective. So AI can be the driver of real change in how we produce materials into the future.
Brandon, thank you so much. We're out of time. This has been
Thank
fantastic.
You. Cheers. Thank you.